This book will give you perspective, a higher perspective in life and towards what you're going through. Dr. Frankel's story, it, it is difficult to forget it because he paints a mental image in your brain of the things he went through. So he makes it difficult to forget what he went through. And by remembering that he actually survived one of the most difficult things in life, which is a concentration camp, thinking about this shows you that almost no matter what you're going through, uh, you can survive.
Welcome to the Book Talk Lounge, brought to you by the Reader Lounge. My name is Emiliano, and this is episode number 3 of the section of the show in which I talk with people from the community about transformational books that have been very valuable to them. My guest today is again my friend Roy, who is an avid reader from Lebanon, founder of the book blog Readers Reviews 1. In our conversation today, Roy and I talk about Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor E. Frankl. Man's Search for Meaning is all about the personal stories of Viktor during the Holocaust, how he survived it, and his reflections on his experience. This is really an inspiring book from which you will gain a lot of perspective and which you can reference when you are facing any type of adversity in your life. Now it's time for you to enjoy this valuable and engaging conversation with my friend Roy about Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor E. Frankl. Okay, so Roy, now let's talk about the second book that you want to share at the Book Talk Lounge. What is it?
Second book is Man's Search for Meaning by Dr. Viktor Frankl.
Great. Oh,
It's a classic book.
it is. And it's basically like the same. I won't start the same with as we started talking about the 5 a.m. Club. How did that book come into your life?
I was introduced to this book on Bookstagram, the book community on Instagram. I saw it several times, and many many book bloggers or book reviewers has spoken very highly of this book. So I thought, let's give it a try, and I'm glad I did. It has become one of my favorite books.
Then what was like? So you bought it, you started reading it. What was the experience of reading it like?
Uh, Very surprising. What Dr. Frankel went through and uh, the overall experience in the concentration camp is just mind blowing. But I would have never imagined such scenarios or such things like sending people to gas rooms because they aren't able or they weren't able to do any labor. So the guards considered these people as useless, so they deserve to die. Uh, this was pretty shocking, but it does paint an image of the world that we live in, or how the world or a part of the world was functioning back in the time. So yeah.
I mean, I have read the book as well, and I do know what you're talking about and the stories that Victor talks about in the book. Do you think that something similar, maybe not that extreme, but that something similar still happens today in some way, maybe even with COVID or with, not letting people go to a certain country because they are not vaccinated or whatever? Do you think that something like that's happening, or what's your take on that?
I'm not exactly sure, so I haven't thought about this
Hmm.
actually about this idea. So uh, and it's a big question. Uh, it does require some thinking because you have to take into consideration politics and
Yes.
whatever the rulers and what's good or what's bad. So I'm not sure I have an answer at the moment.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, it was just like a random
I know,
question that
but
came to my mind.
yeah.
But yeah, and then like getting back into the book, what was what were some of the key takeaways that you had from it? Because I mean, most of the book it's a story, and then just the
Mhm,
last part of it is Victor sharing stuff about his studies. But
mhm.
what were like your key takeaways, your key principles that you acquired after reading the book?
My key takeaways come from the story because the second part feels like more academic,
Mhm.
so it gets technical. You have to push through during this section, especially if, in my case, I was new to this topic of psychology. So there was some technical terms I had to further understand, and it was a little bit challenging for me the second part. But the first part, it shows that uh, almost any amount of suffering can be overcome. And I say almost because I'm sure I don't understand every case in the world, but uh, what you can see in this book and Dr. experienced, because the experience in the concentration camp for sure wasn't easy. And seeing that someone like Dr. Frankel was able to push through and produce something meaningful in his life after surviving the concentration camp shows that uh, I would say whatever suffering I'm going through, it isn't as bad as being in a concentration camp. So I can I can pick myself up and go through the whatever suffering I'm going through.
So, do you reference the book many times in your life when you like are feeling overwhelmed or struggling or like you're facing or like you are facing adversity?
There are two things in this book that just stuck in my mind. First, it is the quote by Friedrich Nietzsche,
Mm.
and he who has a why to live for, he who has a why to live for can bear with almost anyhow. I just
Mm.
have the main idea in my mind, but I've read it in the book. Uh, so, and again, we go back to what I've said before. First, whatever suffering I'm going through, it just isn't as bad as being in a concentration camp, and you don't know when you will be facing death, or and it's one of the most horrible way of dying, being sent to a gas room,
Yes.
I would say. So, uh, so whatever I'm going through, I can pull it off, or I have to go through it because someone has passed through worse time and was able to produce to first survive and produce something meaningful to the whole world. So that's kind of heroic, I would say. And second, actually, this comes from the second part of the book, although I didn't get much of it, but this also stuck in my head, which is always have something meaningful in your life, either for the short term or long term. Because sometimes I go through a phase, I would say, how would this affect my life in the long term? I mean, I don't know what my plans are for the next year, 5 year, or whatever. But having something meaningful to do for the next month, for the next week, uh, it means that I'm doing something productive,
Hmm.
taking into consideration that that this meaningful thing that I have to do for in the short term is actually meaningful and it does bring good either to me or to my surrounding. And I would trust the process, and somehow at the end the dots would connect, as Steve Jobs said. And when you look back again, you can connect the dots. So that's one thing that I learned from the book, that even if at the moment I miss a plan for my future, let me focus on something that brings value in the short term, or or on something that's meaningful in the short term.
Yeah, about the first part. So it makes you acquire perspective when you read about people like him who went through all of this shit, and then through and then thinking about what you're going through. Then I guess that it, or at least in my case, it does help you like to shift your mindset and overcome in in a more courageous way what you're going through. And about the second part, In the book, he talks about how his wife gave meaning to his life. Was it that way, or how was it? Because I don't remember that part very well.
I don't remember it as well.
But I mean, yeah, what I'm trying to say is that he does talk about how even if his long-term life, if we could call it that way, was not like something that he was confident that would happen, even if even if his future was in doubt because he would maybe be killed, he did have meaning for the short term,
Mhm.
whether it was his work, his studies, his wife, because I think that he
Yes,
does mention his wife. But
yeah,
yeah,
he was always thinking about her. She was also in another camp.
yeah, she was also into the camp and into all the suffering, and that also helped him, and that's something. I mean, like, nice to think about, like what gives meaning to your life right now,
Mhm.
so that you can also keep going through this. Have you gone through recently through a stage in which you did not find a lot of meaning in your life, or meaning in the short term? And if you did, do you mind sharing it?
Mm. I want to share something during my university days. When we entered lockdown, most of our exams switched to projects. And when you're starting a new project, you just can't envision, or it's difficult to envision the steps you have to follow. So you look at the problem, let's say, or the project that you have to do, or do the calculation or whatever, and you say, how the heck would I do that? It's just uh, bigger than you might imagine, but it looks difficult. Uh, so it brings some worry, like what would happen if I missed the deadline? What would happen to my grades, whatever, and so on. Uh, but again, I think we can project the focus on the short term and long term meaning and goals into this university project. Let's say the long term goal is to finish the project, but the short term goal, let's say, is to first uh, start with the initial design of the project. Let's say you want to design this mouse. Let's say you want to design this mouse and do some calculation on it.
Hmm.
This is the end goal or the long term goal. For the short term, let's say you can focus on, start with this piece of plastic. Start with something small and take it one step at a time, I would say. And each step is a meaningful short term. I would say this way I would I would have applied something from this book into my university life, I would say.
Yeah, it's very interesting, because here you can see that, I mean, for example, these personal development books and all of what we read and all of this is not just like for you to run more or to work out more or whatever. It does help you even build stuff, even, yeah, create stuff, and that's a pretty cool example, actually. I like that one. And well, just as we did with the 5 a.m. club, I would like you to share, like, another, maybe if you have another, like, key takeaway, key golden nugget that you got from the book, and also, like, review the book and how it helps you and the impact that it had on you and that it can have on people in just a few sentences.
One another takeaway, if we go back to the story of Dr. Frankel and his wife, this shows the importance of having good relationships with others. It just gives meaning to your life, because sometimes you give up on yourself, but you think, I don't want to give up on that person. It could be your parents, and if your brother or your sister or your loved one. So having good relationships in your life uh, does really push you forward, because
Hmm.
sometimes you say, I just don't want to do it, and I don't care what happens. But you think, uh, how would this affect my relationship? How would this affect my parents? How would this affect my siblings? So, and this book is a great example. Like you said, his wife sort of gave him meaning, gave Dr. Frankel meaning in life, to push forward, to not give up. And he was always thinking about her, although he wasn't sure if she was alive or dead. He couldn't get in contact with her in no possible way. And to summarize the book is, uh, first of all, it's a real story. It's not a fiction book. Dr. Frankel is a psychologist. He's the founder of the uh, another department in psychology called Logotherapy, and it's about finding meaning in life. What differentiates logotherapy from normal therapy? I hope I don't get it wrong. Just what I'm saying is based on what I've read from this book. In normal therapy, the patient lies on the couch and talks. In logotherapy, the therapist say to the patient what he needs to hear, even though he don't want to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one difference. This book will give you perspective, a higher perspective in life and towards what you're going through. Dr. Frankel's story, it, it is difficult to forget it because he paints a mental image in your brain of the things he went through. So he makes it difficult to forget what he went through. And by remembering that he actually survived one of the most difficult things in life, which is a concentration camp, not knowing if he has 5 minutes left to live, 1 day, 2 days, 1 year, or he ever survive the concentration camp. Thinking about this shows you that almost no matter what you're going through, uh, you can survive.
Yeah, you can endure and
Yeah.
move onward. I like that.
So I think this is my main takeaway from this book.
Great. Is there
Actually, it
anything
is.
is there anything else you would like to add to this topic and to this book?
Go ahead and read it. If
Nice.
you
And
haven't read the book, read it.
yeah, and it's actually a pretty short book. So I mean,
Yes,
people
it's,
who people who are just getting into reading and all of that could maybe try to read it, and
yeah.
they will get into it hopefully.
Well, the second part is a little bit academic, so I hope it doesn't discourage new readers. But reading the first part uh, can have a big impact on the reader.
Yes. Well, thanks again, Roy.
Thank you, Emiliano.
Hey, so thanks for listening to this episode. I hope that it was valuable for you and that you learned valuable stuff. If you did, please share it to a friend of yours and, just expand the impact. Make sure you are subscribed to the Reader Lounge on YouTube, on podcasting platforms, on Twitter, on Instagram. That was it for today. And so, yeah, I will be talking to you next time. Just keep reading. My name is Emiliano, and goodbye.